When I was younger, all I saw was meaninglessness. It was the absolute core and center of the depression that I carried. I couldn't make sense out of being alive, except to think that maybe the sole purpose of life was suffering itself. I even wore suffering like a merit badge. I couldn't see a way out except through death, but I didn't actually want to die either. I was afraid of that. So there I was stuck. And flash forward 50 years, I was watching a YouTube video the other day, and the person said, and I quote, and how many times I said this growing up, I didn't choose to be born. I didn't ask to be here. And I found myself smiling and remembering a lot of things. Because if that is true, and you didn't choose to be born and you didn't ask to be here, then there really is no way out. It means it's all an accident. There's no point. Nothing matters, not even you. So why be upset? Well, here's the catch, and it's a glorious one. The reason you are upset is because deep down, you know there is something else going on. I know you think you're upset because of meaninglessness. I say you're upset because you know there's something else going on, but you haven't figured out how to access it yet. And that's the core of your upset.
Welcome to Becoming You, where we apply spiritual principles and truth to your everyday life. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty.
I think about this a lot, Haydn, and I want to ask you to speak to it because I have a feeling our listeners think about it too. I watch others, I watch myself, kind of moving through life almost as an alien. Like, do we really know what we're doing here? Do we really know what's going on? Our physical senses pick up a lot of stimuli, but our senses are really just instruments or tools to help us navigate life. We're aware of stuff and we're aware of stuff moving around and we respond to all of that. But our senses really cannot see beyond that surface noise to the deeper meaning and purpose of everything. We just stay really busy on the edge, with all of that stimuli. So here's my question. If we think the story of our life is about doing and achieving, basically surviving, then how do we shift our perspective to a deeper, more real story and experience of our lives? And what is our motivation to put the higher part of ourselves in the driver's seat?
Well, there are two pieces to that. One you're in charge of, and one you're not. The one you're not in charge of is the evolutionary process itself, which has its own goals and its own will. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but I want to get to the heart of your question. In other words, you don't get to make up the rules. You don't get to decide what the game is. The game has already been decided, which is that you are here to evolve and to realize the truth of who you are. Now, the part of you that is in charge is the part of you that can change your mind about how to play the game and how to go about living your life. The aspiration or motivation that an individual eventually may have about wanting to live a more expanded life, to live from a greater understanding of a spiritual basis of life, can emerge from becoming finally just sick and tired of suffering, of being consumed by the meaninglessness. So I think for a lot of people, they're finally motivated, not necessarily by wanting to start a spiritual life, but they have gotten to a point that they're done with the pain and suffering. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a really good start.
So it's kind of like, I don't know what else there is, but I know that I'm tired of this, the way that
Right.
this is
I'm
working.
done
Okay.
with this.
And I just want to clarify, Hayden, we're not saying that you're wrong or that you didn't have the experiences that you had, but the mind and all of the content of the mind, it's like the air, it changes all the time. You think you don't like someone, then you spend time with them and you do. You don't like broccoli, then you try it with cheese kind of roasted on top of it, and suddenly broccoli gets a lot better. You hold a really firm opinion. and you get some new information and the opinion changes.
Well, change is a characteristic of maturation.
Mm.
But when you said a few minutes ago, we see stuff and stuff moving around, and then just a second ago you spoke about an individual's experiences. Those things are such an important part of our life, but the problem is we don't know what they're doing. We see stuff and stuff moving around, but we don't know why. Where's it going? What is the purpose of it? So a lot of it is really just stuff that we make up. And so when I say fictitious, I mean that the content of the mind and how we look at the world does not represent ultimate truth. Because of this, our opinions, positions, and very long held beliefs result in an underlying sense of meaningless and emptiness. It's a narrative that every single one of us come up with from observing all that stuff moving around over the years, but what we come up with is really not real.
It's
It's
like
just
my
our version and story of what we think is going on.
it's like my own self-doubt about not being good enough or being dismissible, and I made that up, when I was young based on experiences and perceptions. One in particular I remember, but most of it, of course, we don't remember. But just because I made it up, it doesn't make it real.
Well, here's the real dilemma. If it's not real, then it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then you can't solve it. I mean, it's just logic. If it's not real, it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, then it means you can't solve it.
Mm.
No matter how hard you try to fix your particular issues, you can't, because you're trying to solve something that isn't real in the first
Well,
place,
but
even though it feels real.
that's what I was about to say. It feels real. And ironically, the mind, my mind anyway, and most people that we've worked with will use these events to prove that it's real or that I'm somehow less than. We put so much energy into those limiting stories, but we can't solve them because they aren't even true. Still, Hayden, we can examine those patterns of self doubt and make positive changes in our thinking and behavior, right?
Well, of course, but make as many changes as you want to, but truth is going to come from somewhere else entirely. The mind is not capable of creating truth. The senses create a fictitious story, not only of ourselves, but of the world. It's a story built on temporary inputs, our impulses, experiences that we've had in life. And last week we talked about this dilemma of relativity, that we all see the world strictly from where we are standing. And so that becomes the only story that we really know and believe, and we think it's real. Here's another foundational piece to help us answer how we can become conscious and more knowledgeable about how our life works. Because if we do not understand the true meaning of our existence, then we do not understand the experiences and events of our life. Because we don't understand the events and purpose of those experiences and events, then we do not understand how to respond to them. Consequently, we're just endlessly confronted with this loop, this circle we can't get out of, that is comprised of meaninglessness and purposelessness, even while
Hmm.
staying absolutely swamped and busy all day long.
I was talking with a client who's, also a friend the other day, and she shared a difficult situation at work. And listening purely through my senses and my judgments, the situation seemed so unfair and pointless, even stupid. Like, why would this hardworking, creative, caring person be removed from a job she loved and moved into a lesser role? But what you just said, Hayden, because we don't understand the event, we do not know how to respond to it, is so profound. I mean, if I only view the event through what my physical senses pick up, I became very critical of her boss. I was defensive of her, confused by the decision, and so on and so on. But nothing improves, nothing is solved, and that's kind of that loop that we get in.
Well, this is what fuels the feeling of meaninglessness. Our knee-jerk reactions and impulses, these chemically addictive emotional patterns that all of us have that respond immediately to the outer appearance of things. And it's hard not to, especially when you feel attacked or hurt or you feel dismissed or
Mhm.
disrespected in some way. But the story of your life is not about that. It is not about the suffering, the mistakes, or the betrayals. The story of your life is not about your past, and it certainly is not about your experiences, even though it feels that way.
Is it accurate then to say that meaninglessness happens when we attach the ultimate significance to the event itself rather than looking behind the curtain, for the purpose that is really inherent in the event? For example, we focus on curing addiction or depression, but the true root we're trying to soothe is actually that deep sense of meaninglessness.
Yes, but when we come to understand the true purpose of any experience or event, suddenly everything makes sense. You go, oh,
Mhm,
now I get why I was, for example, the story you were telling, demoted.
mhm.
It's trying to get me to this other job or, to see this other opportunity that has emerged in my life.
It's like our teacher Robert told somebody who had a similar situation and was, really kind of frantically looking for another job, and he told her, "You're not going to get another job until you've learned what you need to learn from not having a job." That's
Exactly.
the deeper purpose.
Meaninglessness, of course, is the core issue, but this would clarify for all of us that, for example, addiction is not the problem.
Mm.
Loneliness, depression, these are not the problems. These are symptoms of something deeper, which is we have not come to understand our existence and the purpose of our lives.
I get that, and my client, as I was sitting there and we were having lunch, translated losing her job as evidence that she isn't good enough. She definitely translated as she's not safe, she's not gonna be okay, and ultimately, she's not valued or appreciated. And those interpretations directly generate that sense of separation, of loneliness you were just talking about, of emptiness and meaninglessness. And I think that we've all been there in relationships and work, just in life.
I'm not the only one who's had the experience that of having the worst thing that could possibly happen to me happen. But what would happen as a result of it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. So it was really serving that growth and expansion. By the time that it happened, I did not know that. So the story of your life isn't what your mind tells you it is. The true story of your life is really about your awakening and your expansion. It's all positive. It's all good. It's about your becoming.
Mm.
But until you stop letting the experiences define you and you start understanding a deeper purpose of your existence, in other words, changing the story of your life, you really can't live authentically or appropriately. If you don't see your existence appropriately, you can't live appropriately.
And so, usually, after time passes, I can look back and see, oh, now I get it why I had to go through that difficulty or that pain or that loss. I'm hoping to get to the point where I can be in the event and not go down the rabbit hole of, feeling like, the whole sky is falling and recognize that there's something else going on.
Well, let me say this, and I hope this is a clarifying characteristic of this issue of the story of your life. When you begin to understand, even if you don't see the purpose behind the event, but you begin to
Mm,
suspect that there is something greater that is unfolding, as time goes by, you no longer need suffering and pain to cause you to change your mind, which is really part of the true purpose of suffering, which is to get us to wake up. As your mind is, so will your future be. And so most of the content in your mind isn't really about your true existence. It's just about your biological and egoic survival. When this shift begins and the story of your life begins to change, you begin to witness a profound alignment between your inner state and the outer conditions. Life stops unfolding from the outside in and begins moving from the inside out.
So it's instead of I'm being attacked and dismissed and hurt, then how would you translate that?
How did I end up in this situation? What was my role in causing
Mm.
this to happen? Everything shifts towards the inner. And so now it's going to transform the mechanisms that are required to continue to cause you to evolve and grow. In other words, you don't need all that pain and suffering anymore. You can change your mind and choose to grow. No, nothing remains, nothing is trivial. Everyday life transforms into a unified field of endless possibilities. Now the problem is, my God, what do I choose now? Because
I
now I
was just thinking
realize
that.
what I can do. Now I realize what I can truly become. And now the story of your life changes.
Where difficulty could even be a signal for excitement, like, "Well, I wonder what's gonna happen next."
Absolutely.
But most of the time, I think that we don't see situations or even people or ourselves as we truly are. We're seeing everything as we are, as our relativity, as our point of reference has taught us to see. So take my friend, for example, in her job loss, she viewed the event through the lens of being cheated, dismissed, not good enough, discarded. Actually, they didn't even give her a going away breakfast or anything, it's just like kick out the door. She was experiencing and responding to, though, an illusion because out there is not responsible for her value or her self-worth. Out there is not the one that decides that. So here we are in 2026, and the game of life has fundamentally changed. And it really is about playing and living from the inside out and gaining a greater understanding of what that actually means.
Let's practice what our work is all about and why we're doing the podcast is to apply spiritual principle to our life. So let's go to this would be fun. Let's go to A Course in Miracles, which is such a wonderful resource for a spiritual principle that really is based upon the issue of seeing and perception. But the second half of the book is a workbook, and it contains 365 daily lessons. And the first 12, just the first 12, are incredible. And they sound almost deceptively kind of simple at first, but when you really lean into them, they're mind blowing. So let's do the first 12 because
Okay.
I
I love
remember the
these.
first time that I did this. Um, and I read the first one and I went, what? And that was number one without even imagining what 201 was going to be. But let me go through the first six because they're all connected. Nothing I see in this room means anything. I have given everything I see in this room, from this window, on this street, all the meaning it has for me. I do not understand anything I see. These thoughts do not mean anything. I am never upset for the reason I think. I am upset because I see something that is not there.
I see only the past. Hmm. My mind is preoccupied with past thoughts. I see nothing as it is now. My thoughts do not mean anything. My meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. I am upset because I see a meaningless world.
And every time I read those, and I've read them hundreds of times, it seems,
Mhm.
I feel the weight of all the time and energy that I have wasted in my life, particularly when I was young. I am upset because I see something that is not there. All the fear, all the worry, all the upset, all the scarcity comes from that perceptual field that is born in the mind. My God, how many times have I done that in my life? Even after all these years of working with it, I can still find myself doing that.
It happens so easily. I mean, just a nanosecond. One of my favorite stories about that, Hayden, happened during a break at one of our workshops, and a woman walked up to me, visibly upset, at the break, and she said, "Look at this email I just got from my boss. He's being so disrespectful." And I read that one-line email, which was just like a it seemed like a routine professional question, and I looked at her and I asked, "What am I missing? Where is the disrespect?" And she pointed at the screen and said, "See that smiley face? See that smiley face at the end? He's sticking it to me." That's why we say the source of all conflict is self-doubt. We project our internal doubts about ourselves onto other people, situations, a single line in an email, and we use them, as proof of our own limiting story. For example, that I'm disrespectable. I use a smiley face.
Well, that's also proof for the statement, I am never upset for the reason I think. I am always upset about something else, and that something else has to do with me, not
Mhm.
the world, not other people.
And I'm not saying he wasn't sticking it to her. I don't know, but she's the one that gave it the energy, as you were talking about
So
before.
that is how what you see dictates how you're going to respond.
Right.
So go back to number 12, which really serves kind of as a culmination of this idea. I'm upset because I see a meaningless world, which is kind of what we started off with in the podcast. And what do we do when we feel that emptiness? Here we go with the addictions. We lose hope. We move into depression. We quit. We rage. We blame and project. And just look at our country today. We've arrived at this incredible crossroad, but it isn't the nation or society as an abstract group that has to face this challenge.
Mm.
It's you, the individual. It's me. If you want to change the world, you have to change yourself first. The outer world is simply an effect. It is not the cause of your suffering. You are the cause. And this is the shift in the story of our lives and what is happening today. While there seems to me kind of be a natural part where in the growing up phase where everybody has to confront the meaninglessness of their life, today this game has fundamentally changed. The answers that we spent years seeking are now sitting right in front of us today that was not available to us simply 20 years ago. Overnight, this paradigm has shifted. The story of your life has shifted. There is nothing but meaning.
And I think the paralysis that many people feel is because we're still attached to, but what can I do? How can I end this? How can I begin this? How can I, when we look out there in the world, but we're talking about a shift internally that then leads to doing rather than doing to try to get the experience of being.
It is the internal that is dictating the external. And this is part of this change of the story of our life today. I can't express this strongly enough. What we are all going through, it's not political. It is not a social trend. It is not a social experiment. It is about a profound phase in the evolutionary process, which is a spiritual process. We're all living through, in my opinion, one of the grandest moments in human history. We are witnessing humanity moving from simple self awareness to a greater consciousness.
I've heard so many people say this lately, Hayden, that people are waking up. And what does waking up actually mean? It means, to me, realizing that for life to be deeply satisfying, understood, fulfilling, we have to move from just the physical hustle and bustle to the metaphysical, to the spiritual. It has to shift from the outer aspects and activity of daily survival to a quiet inner reality of the spirit.
Well, let me say this. If you summarized it about what this shift in the story of your life is about, it is about a shift in reality of what is real and what is not.
It means, not just to be aware of that divine presence, but living consciously within it, to let it be in the driver's seat, as I was asking about before. And this may make even more sense. I'll say it this way: you're never separated from God, no matter what, and no one else is either. This isn't about a specific religion or dogma. It's about the invisible forces that are shaping our lives. It's our journey back to the soul.
And if you're ready to consider such a journey, not alone, but with a bunch of other dedicated group of like-minded individuals, consider participating in the online project, the becomingyoujourney.com community. It's a wonderful experience that we hope you'll consider.
Well, inside, as part of the membership, we take these spiritual principles and give you the daily practices. We have live workshops and a very supportive community. It's just wonderful to help you shift from ego survival into true consciousness. So, if you're ready to stop playing the same old game and start living from the inside out, you could also go over to truthspringasheville.com to find out about the Becoming You journey and the other workshops we have available for you. We'd love to have you join us.
So, if the story of your life that you've been telling yourself isn't your true story, then there's wonderful news. There's another story waiting for you. And that story goes beyond words. This movement that is taking place is not based upon a linear step by step, here's how you do it. It's going to be very unique for each one of us as to how we make this shift. And how do I know this? Because truth is never expressed in the negative. If all there is God, then all there is truth. All there is joy. All there is peace. And if you're willing to consider that maybe, just maybe, you're not who you thought you were, then that new story can begin to emerge. But you're going to have to figure out how to disrupt and dislodge your mind from your past
Mm.
and create a foundation and framework for that truth, not just to be known intellectually, but to be lived. As a great teacher once said, he said, there's truth to live and work to do. And we all have a lot of work to do in this great shift that is taking place.
And it's a little different from stuff to do.
Right. Well, the work is inside. It's an internal movement, and it is learning to see and be versus all this doing that we have thought up to this point. Well, this is going to save us. I'll make enough money, I'll have enough stuff, and I will be fine. And it turns out to be the exact opposite.
Hmm.
So the rest of your life can begin right now. The sense of meaningless will begin to melt away, but it is going to require some real inner changes. But don't worry about that. It's just whether or not you choose to take that path in your life. And honestly, in my opinion, that's what all the friction and the disaster that we see in the world today is really about. And it's what each individual is being given the opportunity to do, which is the breaking up of the old crust so that the new growth can emerge and essentially seek the light and the experience of its true self.
And when we talk about the past, it's even yesterday. I'm not talking about we are talking about your childhood, but it's also the past of a minute ago, to be willing to look at, for example, the job loss in a whole different way, so that I'm not consumed with that, but I can let something new grow out of it. Each of us invests in, our different realities that we make up, but there is a world beyond that. And those worlds have their own laws, their own luminous truths, their own will, and they're not affected by us. We, however, can't really exist without the divine or whatever your word is for that. We live by that, but that does not live by us or by the physical world. So the existence of consciousness doesn't depend on whether we recognize it or not. It is always there and always available. Because the quality of your life depends on aligning with this higher part of yourself, this truth consciousness, that feels like the motivation I was talking about, Hayden, at the beginning of this conversation, the motivation to change our minds about who we are and what we're doing here.
You don't have to know how it's going to happen. That's what it, or you could say that's what it does. That's how it operates. How you view and see the situation, how you see the story of your life determines how that story plays out. We have so much power and control over the destiny of our life, in spite of the fact that we will have to meet difficulties along the way. But anybody who's ever experienced even a sliver of this different reality, this higher reality, will tell you that it feels more real than the physical world itself. And I'm one of those people. In this state, there is no duality, no division. It is only a unified consciousness of, it's easy to say this, but it's true, of pure love. Why would I trade that for my own personal everyday insanity?
Well, I know what my insanity is gonna get me. I know what my doing is gonna get me. On one side, it's gonna get me, food and security and things that I enjoy, but on the other side,
Well,
people
apparently not. But sometimes that works out and
Right.
sometimes it doesn't.
But I also am aware that it can lead to feelings of, overwhelm and anxiety and as we've been talking about, meaninglessness.
Well, from the beginning of time, world philosophies and religions have pointed to a common thread. They all represent a common direction, which is the kingdom of heaven, so to speak, is not here, but is somewhere else. And for centuries, people have withdrawn from the world to find that. People leave the body, go
Mhm.
to heaven, practice duality, but it doesn't work that way. True
By
consciousness,
duality, you mean?
the duality of life and death, for
Oh,
example, of
I'm here and then I'm there.
right. Well,
Okay.
most people want to trade their here for there because of the difficulties that each one of us experience in being in a physical body in this physical life. But consciousness doesn't separate, it unifies everything good and bad. It reveals the purpose behind the event, behind the situation, behind the shadows, so to speak. It unifies suffering and joy. It's not trying to change the suffering, which, going back to what I said earlier and to be consistent, does not really exist. And I know that that sounds heretical, but it's true. Everything is consciousness. Everything that is taking place is part of that process. And when you step into a more unified understanding of the story of your life, the possibilities are endless.
So, truth doesn't fluctuate the way that the mind does or the way that our opinions or that we do. It isn't inconsistent or confused. That's how we know that the mind doesn't come up with truth. I think everyone seeks a greater life and affirmation of who they are, but we keep using the same old mental and emotional habits to try to achieve that. I think the mind says, stick with me. Now I've gotten us this far. Just keep playing the I'm not good enough game or life is meaningless game and everything will be okay. You don't have to reach too high, but deep down that's not true. So I'll say it again, the story you think your life is about, your past, your experiences, that's not your true story. And if you're willing to hear this, I think this is really powerful. The story is not about the crucifixion, it's about the resurrection. The story is not about the struggle or the imprisonment that everyone experiences. It's about liberation. The story of our times, what we're living through right now in 2026, will not be remembered solely for the ignorance and the waste, but for the awakening that is born out of it. It's time to write a new story. As your mind is, so is the world upon which your thoughts are projected. The ultimate power that we have is learning to see what our physical eyes cannot see, to be willing to create from our inside, not just from what's happening outside. And until then, we're just going to keep being upset by something that isn't even there.
Truth is not subject to your mood, current events, political posturing, or personal opinion. Truth is, and this is really simple to understand, truth is changeless.
Mhm.
Whether you succeed or fail in the world, that changelessness is exactly and precisely what makes it real. Truth has no opposite. Try carrying that thought with you for the rest of the week, for the next couple of days. Truth has no opposite.
Opinions have opposites.
Opinions have opposites. Beliefs have opposites. Positions have opposites. And people often think that if something feels meaningless, it doesn't have any power, but that is wildly false. Look at what a perceived lack of meaning does to your body, to your mental health, to your relationships.
And
Truth isn't a set of beliefs. It's a state of isness, a state of consciousness. Think about how wonderful that is. You don't have to invent the meaning. You simply choose to awaken to it because it's already there, right here, right now, available to all of us to help us change our mind about the story of our life.
Mira El-Fasa, who became known as the mother, one of my favorites to reach out to, said this so beautifully. When you feel that life is meaningless, that is the sign that you are on the threshold of a new discovery. It's the announcement that a higher consciousness is trying to manifest in you. And that's exactly what's happening. And that's what waking up is. And then her spiritual collaborator, Sri Aurobindo, wrote, suffering is the stroke of a chord in the instrument of the soul to awaken it from the sleep of the physical nature.
And the sleep of the physical nature always produces meaninglessness and suffering. It's the weirdest thing.
So it's the stroke of a chord in the instrument of the soul to wake us up.
Right, exactly.
And
That's
who
its
hasn't
purpose.
felt that stroke of the chord, and the story of your life is so much greater than what you have learned from the past, even though those lessons can be extremely valuable. We're more than that. And I want to leave you with this kind of hopeful truth. The chaos in the world today is not a sign of the end. It is a sign of a new birth. It's the old world dissolving to make room for the new creation. And you are here right now to be a conscious and powerful part of it.
And to see what your eyes cannot see. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time.
Thank you.